I sat at my sleek oak desk, the city skyline stretching behind me like a silent witness to the life I had built. The silk of my blouse felt cool against my skin, but no amount of comfort could soothe the knot in my stomach. My phone buzzed insistently, vibrating against the polished wood, and for a moment I let it lie there, pretending it wasn't reality knocking. Then I saw the message. Court documents have been filed regarding your husband's offshore accounts. Every dollar traced. My chest tightened. Memories surged. Late nights discovering irregular statements, the polite lies he had spun, the little half-truths that should have set off alarms. I had spent years protecting my calm, my dignity, even while a storm raged behind closed doors. Now the storm had caught up. I pressed my hand to my temple, tasting the faint bitterness of coffee that had gone cold. Pride, hurt, and a simmering sense of irony all tangled together. He thought he could hide $230,000 offshore and never be found. He thought I would never see through the shadows. I smoothed my skirt, straightened the stack of papers I had been reviewing, and took a deep breath. Today I would face what had been buried, and for the first time in years, I felt a pulse of something I hadn't felt in a long while. Anticipation, not fear. I remember the first time I truly doubted him. My husband, Jason. We had been married less than 2 years, and I was still learning how love could blind you to the smallest cracks. I had found an unfamiliar bank statement while organizing our joint accounts. A string of transfers that didn't make sense, all labeled vaguely, miscellaneous, or savings. My hands had trembled as I confronted him at the kitchen table. The warm glow from the chandelier did nothing to soften the lump rising in my throat. "Jason, what is this?" I had asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He had smiled, that practiced charm I once thought was irresistible. "Sophie, it's nothing. Just some money I set aside for investments." His tone was casual, but I could feel the weight behind it, the little lies hidden in the cadence of his words. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But the unease lingered, gnawing at me in quiet moments, while pouring coffee, while folding laundry, while lying in bed pretending to sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was being kept from me. It was my grandmother, Maeve, who finally gave me the courage I didn't know I had. "Child," she had said, pressing a small worn charm into my palm, "trust yourself. A woman knows when she's being deceived. Follow that voice, it never fails." I had held the charm close that night, feeling its cold metal and the warmth of her belief. The next morning I made a choice. I would stop relying solely on him, stop trusting blindly. I began quietly educating myself about finances, reading late into the night about investments, offshore accounts, and legal protections. Each page felt like a small rebellion against the helplessness I had felt. By the end of that week I had opened a separate account in my name, one that only I could access. It was the first step toward reclaiming control, not just over our money but over my life. A quiet defiance took root inside me, and I knew I was no longer a passive observer in the story of my own future. With the small seed of independence planted, I started building a life that was entirely mine. I rented a modest office downtown, the kind with sun-streaked windows and a creaky elevator that smelled faintly of old paper. Every evening I stayed late, poring over spreadsheets, studying financial reports, and learning the intricacies of wealth management that Jason had tried so desperately to hide. It wasn't easy. The first few months I questioned myself constantly. Did I have the skills? Could I really handle the numbers, the clients, the negotiations? But slowly I found my rhythm. I remember the first big client meeting. I had ironed my blouse until it gleamed, checked my reflection until my confidence felt real, and walked into the office with my grandmother's charm hidden beneath my necklace. That charm became a talisman, her faith now coursing through me. Then there was Martin Hayes, a seasoned financial advisor who saw potential in me where others only saw a young woman trying to survive. He became my mentor, offering advice, critiques, and sometimes just a steadying presence when I felt I was drowning in numbers and doubt. "You have the drive, Sophie," he said one evening as we went over an investment plan. "Now you need to trust yourself as much as you trust the numbers." Those words echoed in my head for weeks. There were late nights when I wept quietly at my desk, frustrated by mistakes or the weight of the deception I'd endured. There were mornings I barely slept, staring at the city from my apartment balcony, wondering if anyone would ever take me seriously. But for every moment of doubt there was a small victory. My first profitable deal, the first client who praised my insight, the day I realized I had enough in my accounts to actually call it my money, truly untouchable by Jason or anyone else. I kept my successes mostly secret, sharing modest updates on social media, never flaunting the truth. Friends and family thought I was managing just fine, but only I knew the full scope of what I had built. I was learning to enjoy the quiet pride of unseen victories, the satisfaction of knowing that every dollar Jason tried to hide had inspired me to create something greater, something fully my own. By the time I stepped into the court that fateful day, I wasn't just a woman who had discovered her husband's secret. I was a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ground up, quietly, deliberately, and with an unshakable sense of self-worth. And I was ready to show the world exactly what that meant. The morning Jason walked into my office, he expected to see the same hesitant, overwhelmed woman he had married years ago. He didn't anticipate the space itself. The walls adorned with abstract paintings I had handpicked, the sunlight glinting off the polished oak desk, the shelves lined with legal and financial tomes I had devoured over endless nights. Everything whispered success, independence, control, and he knew none of it existed when we had shared a home. I watched him pause in the doorway, mouth slightly open, eyes scanning the room as if he might wake from a dream and find me gone. He had never seen me like this, not fully me, not fully in command. "Jason," I said calmly, letting my words hang in the air. "Please sit." He obeyed, still trying to read the expression on my face. I gestured to a chair opposite mine, the soft leather creaking under his weight. "Do you remember the account you thought you could hide from me?" I asked. My voice was even, but inside, a storm of vindication and relief raged. He swallowed hard. "Sophie." I held up a hand, letting him falter. "Stop. I've known about it for years. Every transfer, every offshore investment. And thanks to some careful legal work, and a little determination, I've traced every single dollar." I let the pause linger, the silence amplifying his guilt. Then I leaned back, letting my fingers rest lightly on the desk. "But here's the part you didn't expect. Not only have I reclaimed what was hidden, but I've also grown it, invested it wisely, and built my own financial empire along the way. This isn't just your money, Jason. It's proof that I don't need you, or your lies, to succeed." His face paled. Disbelief flickered first, then shame, then something like awe. I watched as the man who had once wielded control through deception realized he had underestimated me completely. I opened my laptop, sliding it across the desk. Charts, statements, investment portfolios, all under my name, legally and securely mine. Everything you thought you had hidden, every dollar, pounded for. And it's only a fraction of what I've achieved since you tried to deceive me. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes, and for the first time in years I saw genuine regret. Not the practiced apology, not the defensive charm, but raw, exposed guilt. I didn't gloat. I let him absorb the truth, the room thick with tension, until he could no longer hide the enormity of what had happened. Every asset, every deal, every success I had quietly nurtured. It was my testimony. My voice, calm yet resolute, sealed the revelation. I had turned his betrayal into my triumph, and now he was powerless to reverse it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle around us. Jason's gaze was fixed on the polished floor, shame etched into every line of his face. But I wasn't here to humiliate him. I was here to reclaim my life, and make sure that past patterns never repeated themselves. "You made choices," I began softly but firmly. "Choices that could have destroyed me financially, emotionally, even mentally. And while I could have crushed you entirely, I'm not here to do that. I'm here to set terms, conditions that will guide both of us toward growth, accountability, and, frankly, respect." His head lifted slightly, curiosity mingling with dread. "First," I said, "you will be transparent from now on. No more hidden accounts, no more secrecy. I want to see documentation of every financial decision you make, not to control you, but so that trust can be rebuilt if that's possible." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Second," I continued, "you need to address your compulsive need for control. It's cost us so much more than money. Therapy, reflection, self-awareness. These aren't suggestions. They're requirements." Jason's face tightened, but I didn't relent. "Third, you must respect the independence I have carved for myself. I am no longer a dependent, no longer a woman defined by your decisions. You will honor my autonomy, or you will not be part of this process at all." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I care about you in the way a human can care for someone who hurt them, but that care has limits. You will meet these conditions before any reconciliation can be considered. And if you can't, the consequences are yours alone. The room felt heavier yet charged with possibility. The shift in power was undeniable. I was no longer the woman who had silently endured betrayal. I had the upper hand, but it was tempered by wisdom, not vindictiveness. I wanted accountability, not revenge. Growth, not resentment. Finally, I added, if you're willing to do this work, there's a path forward. If not, then you will watch me thrive from afar, as you should have supported me all along. For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a reluctant recognition that the woman he once underestimated had become someone impossible to manipulate. And in that recognition I found an odd comfort. Power, I realized, isn't about punishment. It's about defining your boundaries, asserting your worth, and demanding respect without apology. Weeks passed, and the changes I had insisted upon began to take shape. Jason followed through with therapy, confronting habits that had long undermined our relationship. He learned slowly but surely the meaning of accountability. Even as he stumbled, I saw glimpses of sincerity, and it reminded me that people can evolve when faced with consequences, and that I had the power to enforce those consequences with grace. My life continued to flourish. The office that once smelled faintly of dust now hummed with energy and achievement. Clients came and went, but the lessons I had learned, the patience, the diligence, the quiet fortitude, remained constant. I noticed the small things that once would have passed me by: the sunlight hitting a freshly polished table, the chipped nail polish on a client's hand, the aroma of coffee brewing during late-night calculations. These little details reminded me how fully alive I was in my own world, no longer tethered to someone else's secrets. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker, I held my grandmother Maeve's charm in my hand. Its cool metal reminded me of her faith in me, the belief that a woman knows her worth even when no one else does. I had followed her advice, and it had guided me through betrayal, doubt, and the long climb to independence. That tiny charm had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and quiet power. I reflected on everything: the betrayal, the hidden accounts, the sleepless nights, and the painstaking victories. I had endured pain that could have broken me, yet it had forged a strength I never imagined I possessed. The relationships I valued, those grounded in honesty, mutual respect, and love, remained intact. The others, I realized, were no longer my concern. And so, as the city hummed beneath me, I whispered to myself with a soft, confident smile: I am enough. I am whole. And no secret, no betrayal, no hidden fortune will ever define me again.